Order, order. I call Alexander Stafford to move the motion.
Mr. Chairman, it's an honour to stand and debate under your chairmanship. And I rise to argue that we must do more to improve children's access to books. It is undeniable that books should form part of a holistic educational curriculum for our children. What is less clear, but no less true, is the impact that literacy and reading rates have on their personal lives, their education, or their future career. There's no better skill to give to our children than love of reading, and no easier way to do so than is by ensuring good access to books. Members will be aware that I recently brought a similar debate to this House. We sought to promote our children's school libraries. This is, of course, an excellent way to improve children's access to books. But to capture the benefits that literacy and reading give to children, we must have a comprehensive strategy which includes making sure that books are accessible to every child at every stage of their education. Books play a vital role in our cultural heritage, something that seems particularly British to me. These stories might seem trivial to an outsider. For example, the national outcry against retrospectively modernisation to Roald Dahl's children's classics. But these stories and books have brought home to me the respect and love we have for our books of all varieties. This is not only because of their value as a cross-generational medium or because of nostalgic personal value. It's also because we all know, deep down, that reading is good. It's the simple fact that reading for pleasure bestows unlimited returns, both in their children's education, their future vocation, and their life in general. And the best way to bring our children the success and opportunities that come with reading is to cut away barriers obstructing children from access to books. As those present at the previous debate will remember, Yorkshire and Humber, which is obviously Rother Valley is part of, has the unfortunate accolade of being the worst area in the UK for children's book ownership, with nearly 10% of children, primarily from lower income households, reporting they do not own one single book. It would not be uncommon to think automatically that children who have books at home are slightly more likely to enjoy reading and perhaps have marginally higher reading skills than their peers who do not. But the size of the gap is far larger than we can possibly imagine. Perhaps this is most starkly characterised by the statistic that children with books at home are twice as likely to say they enjoy reading than those who do not, and are 6 times more likely to read at above the level expected for their age. What we also might not take into account is what impact these statistics have on the rest of our children's lives. Literacy has a stark and direct impact not only on education, but also on standards of living, job prospects, and even life expectancy. For example, those with lower literacy rates earn roughly 7% less than those with average literacy rates. 75% of women with low literacy rates have never received promotion. And perhaps the most shocking statistic is the disparity between life expectancy can be up to 20 years, depending on literacy rates in the area in which the child was born. Sadly, for some, it may soon be too late. Low book ownership, combined with the global pandemic, which disrupted education, means that some children may never be able to develop a love of reading. This is clear from the official statistics. For example, Key Stage 1 SATs results fell in illiteracy from 76% to 59% between 2019 to 2022. Of course.
Thank you, Sir Christopher. The Honourable Gentleman is making an excellent speech highlighting the vital importance of literacy and the importance of books in children's homes. Does he agree with me that the statistics he's just quoted indicate and support the need for a much greater catch-up programme for children at school?
Thanks for understanding. I thank the Honourable Member for that intervention. And it's clear, and I'll get onto this later in my speech, that more must be done at all levels to make sure that literacy rates are caught up. And of course, access to books is one, but for those children who do not have access to books, we should of course put in measures to make sure they do catch up. But nevertheless, without the books there in the first place, whether it's in the home or in the schools or the libraries, they are going to always struggle to catch up. And what we must do is deal with the root cause of that. Of course.
He's right to highlight the importance of phonics and literature in learning. On the issue of books, it can often be the case that young people are now engaging their education through digital means, and I just wonder if he would address that point when he's making suggestions to the Minister about how we can support and how schools can support young people to engage with literature and the written word through what is going to be the medium of the future, which are computers and digital forms of communication.
Our friend for the intervention is quite right. In fact, I address a large chunk of my speech yet to come on whether it's audiobooks, whether it's how to use TikTok and other such digital means to engage with people and e-books. So I'm sure he'll look forward to listening to that part of the speech immeasurably. On that point, I'm happily away.
Before he moves on to e-books, probably is one of the few MPs who's written children's books, as I have. I just wanted to contribute, first of all, to congratulate him on securing this very, very important debate, but also raise the point that books in of themselves are collaborative, not only for the author to write them and work, as I did with my daughter, to come up with a storyline, but also that moment of an evening with your child, to actually spend time with them, to read a book to them, not just within schools, but also that family moment that within books. And I think there's a really powerful point here about the use of storytelling, the point of creativity, and whether that's done via a physical book, whether that's via an e-book, or even listening to an audiobook. I think that important part is the parent-child time to collaborate together and think of new creative ways to express one's own emotions and one's own story.
I couldn't agree with my honourable friend. Well, reading is incredibly important. I personally enjoy reading with my two daughters immeasurably. I was read to by my father and family as a young child, and it creates that story, that images, that sets you up for later life. And I will be addressing that as well later on in my speech. We have a long way to go, my friends, so we will continue back to my point about the pandemic, unfortunately, holding a lot. But before we do that, I'll happily give way.
Just thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make a quick intervention on the point about reading together. I can say that as a former English teacher of 23 years, children and young people never get too old to love being read to. They'll love it when you read aloud to them, no matter what age they are.
Thank you. And it's not a pleasure for people who listen to the story, but also to give the story as well. After all, we're all politicians, and we love hearing the sound of our own voices. So I'm telling a story today. We are doing storytelling about the future. Now, before I continue my speech, I was thinking, well, I wonder if there are any more interventions, but it seems a very apt place everyone else seems to be doing. But no, I will happily continue my pandemic. But one further point, Mr. Chairman, I will comment again on my honourable friend for Watford's point and congratulate him for writing a children's book, of which, unfortunately, Mr. Chairman, I've yet to receive a copy of. So I'm looking forward to giving one toot sweet. So thank you very much. But back to the effect the pandemic has had on literacy rates. So what's most concerning is the yet-to-be effects of the 10% of children who spent the pandemic at home without books would have been, when they returned to school, they would have been further behind their peers who had books. And children on free school meals are both much less likely to own books and much less likely to enjoy reading with their friends. A statistic which has doubled over the pandemic, as children spent long periods without access to books or reading materials due to the schools being closed. And as I mentioned in my previous debate, focusing on the importance of improving access to libraries, something recently reinforced to me is the data showing that 30% of parents were borrowing more books from libraries than ever before. And clearly that is paying dividends in my area as well, with the announcement of a new library in Thurcroft. But accessing books can be made easier, and therefore more likely for children to do than only through a library. Now, locally in my area, despite the Labour-run Rotherham Council spending millions of pounds building a new central library, and while we are still paying upwards of £5 million a year in rent for Riverside House, the council offices, and its library, which were opened just 10 years ago, few of my constituents in Rother Valley will ever visit it, and fewer still will want to borrow a book from the catalogue in dire need of updating. Spending just a fraction of that money, which the Labour-run council has spent on putting books in the hands of children of Rother Valley, is a far more efficient way to improve the lives of children in Rother Valley. Rotherham, of course, as I'm sure you know, has the second lowest reading attainment levels for Key Stage 2, something that the data shows us can easily be solved by helping children more easily accessible to books, and which is where the Rotherham Council should be spending money instead. Luckily, there are easy solutions to these issues, both locally and nationally. And one of this government's greatest legacies, I'm sure, will be an investment in those areas which have been left behind for many years. In some cases, the levelling up can mean direct investment, and changes to infrastructure, as we are pleased to be seeing in Rother Valley with the Dinnington High Street project and the Maltby Skills Academy. However, providing books to those without is undoubtedly one of the simplest and most cost-efficient ways of improving the lives of 1.2 million children up and down the United Kingdom and giving them the best start, best possible start, to their lives and careers. Now, as already mentioned in the interventions, one point that is becoming clearer to me is that we must embrace technology in our pursuit of improving access to books. Across human history, the first true literacy revolution was, I believe, undoubtedly the invention of scrolls and paper, allowing quicker, lighter, and more accessible reading and writing away from the stone tablets of old. The second innovation must be the printing press, bringing books and literacy to the people, as William Caxton did only a few hundred yards from where we sit today. And I also believe that many of us have lived through a similarly important revolution in the development of e-books and audiobooks, reinventing the way we read and get information. These new technologies will prove to be game changers in both our children's access to books and how they read. E-books, which can be as simple as a concept as a PDF saved on a phone or on any number of e-readers, allow for quick and free access to books that was unattainable outside of a library just a few years ago. Not only can a phone or e-reader hold thousands of titles, they're also nearly always cheaper than their printed counterparts, often for the simple reason of next to no unit costs, meaning they are far more accessible for younger readers in less well-off households. Indeed, for many classic books that we might want our children to enjoy, as we did, they are available online for free through sites like Project Gutenberg, which boasts over 70,000 e-books free to download, the title stretching from Marcus Aurelius to Sun Tzu, anything a child would want to read. For children, there are also other advantages to reading through technology. A trial programme points to a huge uplift in reading enjoyment across the board when reading on screens. This is backed up by an increase in pupils reading outside of school. Not only do children enjoy reading electronic devices, but they also enjoy it so much that they do it on their own time. It may also be better for their development and preparedness for their careers, with jobs these days often involving the reading of text from a screen rather than a piece of paper. Audiobooks should also share the stage given their proven results, encouraging those who might otherwise not read to do so. In the first instance, audiobooks have a huge reach amongst younger readers. A 2022 survey tells us that 40% of those aged between 12 and 15 are regular users of audiobooks, whereas only 24% of those aged above 55 responded the same. What's more, audiobooks bridge disparities that we usually see in reading and writing amongst children. For example, the National Literary Trust reports that listening is the only form in which boys have higher levels of engagement, of both engagement and enjoyment, than girls. Audiobooks are an invaluable way of making books and the benefits that come with reading more accessible to those who might normally miss out. Given these new ways of reading, both encourage it and make books even easier than ever to access, how should we be supporting them? As I mentioned, Yorkshire has the lowest rate of children's book ownership, but given the ubiquity of smartphone and computer ownership and the availability of e-books and audiobooks, the answer is right there. I've already touched on some of the charitable endeavours in this area, although I'm pleased to report there are many other excellent charities also helping to spread e-book ownership, including from public libraries. Increasing access to books also means making them as accessible as possible. For the more than 350,000 children with some form of learning difficulty, reading may present more of a challenge. How can reading for pleasure even be considered if reading is a constant struggle for these children? I've already talked about how e-books and audiobooks greatly increase reading enjoyment, but this is especially true when looking at the impact on children with dyslexia or any other educational support needs, as well as those who simply struggle with reading. 1 in 10 children have some form of dyslexia, so this should not be overlooked as an area that needs focus. As in other areas in life, technology can provide easy ways for many to overcome hurdles. In this case, those presented by reading e-books can be more beneficial than printed books. For example, being able to quickly change fonts and sizes, or access a dictionary to find out the meaning of new or difficult words. A real step forward in helping those who are most in need of encouragement. The British Dyslexia Association has many excellent suggestions for how to help children's dyslexia to read and write, and agree that e-books and this technology is a clear game changer for children with dyslexia. As well as technology, however, another central suggestion is paired reading, we've already talked about. A child and their parent reading together for 10 minutes a day is a perfect example. But unfortunately, when looking at the bigger picture, if 10% of children in my areas do not own a book, and 10% of those children have dyslexia, this means that 1%, nearly 130,000 children across the UK, simply do not have the resources to overcome their learning difficulties, blighting their career and life prospects. Over the course of this debate and the last, I've had a particular focus on younger children, like those in primary school, and this may be because of my own personal bias with my two daughters, Persephone and Charlotte. But unfortunately, it seems to me that the same is true of our educational system, focusing literacy education on younger children at the expense of older children. Over 75% of children aged between 5 and 8 say they enjoy reading, but sadly this number trends downwards over the next years of education, with only 45% of 14 to 16-year-olds saying the same. This means that somewhere in our schools, children lose that passion for reading. Secondary school, for some of the last years of formal education, can be an invaluable time to fall in love with reading before life's, frankly, other worries take over. We must do more to encourage our teenagers to read and enjoy reading. The point could be made that because so many forms of entertainment are instantly available to our children, and teenagers in particular, we should do more to make books relevant and accessible. Here, again, we can look to technology to solve these issues. As I mentioned, ebooks and audiobooks will give them thousands of stories in their pocket. But how do we actually get them to open the ebooks and read them? Now, the rise of social media phenomenon like Bookstagram or BookTok has undoubtedly led to more teenagers reading, with some books' dust jackets now proudly marketing themselves as being a TikTok favourite. So these platforms provide a social aspect to books, allowing users to give and receive recommendations from peers with similar interests, as well as connecting those with a passion for a genre or a series of books. The BookTok hashtag has over 143 billion views worldwide. Some of the most watched highlighting, for example, books by Black British authors, or what's put on your summer reading list. These videos and social groups are reconnecting teenagers to books, albeit in a very different way than previous generations. This is engagement that should be encouraged, helping to make books and reading as accessible as possible to other teenagers. Whatever other concerns may plague social media, this is undoubtedly a force to be reckoned with in the battle for teenage literacy. And now that I've outlined the importance of better access and better accessibility to books, how should we look to achieve this access for our children? The best way to manage this would be through a British book strategy, with the ultimate goal that every child should have many books of their own to cherish and enjoy at their own leisure. This would work hand in hand with the overall educational strategy and complement both the government's education white paper of last year and the Prime Minister's numeracy campaign. I believe that this debate will go some way to outline what might be contained within that strategy, and I will condemn the following points to the Minister. Firstly, we must seriously examine the ways in which technology can help children's access to books, rather than looking at technology as somehow at odds with reading. I've already extolled the virtue and benefits of ebooks and audiobooks, given their lower cost and the universal access technology capable of reading or listening to them, and they must be front and centre of any book strategy. But there are, of course, other ways that technology can improve access to books that I have not talked about, I don't have time to talk about, like apps for public libraries, or technological supports to teaching of phonics. Secondly, and perhaps related, we must work to ensure that reading is not seen as a struggle or challenge for those children who find it more difficult than others. With the right processes, even those with the most severe learning disabilities can be shown the joy to be found in reading for pleasure, and so reap the same benefits as those without those difficulties. Finally, we cannot forget the importance of continuing to stress the importance of reading as children grow up. Perhaps, given its proven rewards, reading or library time should be a continued presence in our children's timetable throughout their educational career, regardless of what they're studying, to prevent the terrible decline in reading enjoyment that we are currently seeing. Or perhaps encouraging reading-friendly social media may help to give books relevance to our digital society and help in removing the barriers between teenagers and reading. And this is especially true for those leaving formal education as they turn 16. In conclusion, the government's excellent Schools White Paper promises to do more to ensure that every child can access cornerstone literacy and give them the tools to lead a happy, fulfilled and successful life. Better access to books is the simplest and best way to manage this. The only tools children need are the books themselves. We know that higher literacy and more reading lead to a longer, happier and more fulfilled lives. And there's no better way to do this than put a book in the hands of every child. World Book Day will be on the 7th of March next year, a date by which I hope every child will have a book of their own, which to celebrate it with, to love with it, and to share with their friends and family.
The question is that this House has considered the matter of improving children's access to books. Matt Rother. Oh, sorry. In that case, it's Jim Shannon.
Thank you very much, Sir Christopher. It's a real pleasure to speak in this, and can I first of all thank the honourable gentleman for Rother Valley, who, with enthusiasm, energy and passion for the case, puts it forward very, very well, and it's well seen that he has a deep interest in this subject matter. It's also a pleasure to be involved in this debate. I suppose really from a now grandfather with 6 grandchildren, very much recognise the interest that the grandchildren have in books. The honourable gentleman for Rother Valley referred to his 2 own children. That's his interest as well, part of his interest in the books. So I think whenever children come along, and grandchildren in my case come along, then that deep interest in books is reinvigorated by their passion and their hunger for books as well, which I see through my children. Teaching children to read and giving them the ability to do so paves the way, I believe, for the future that they will have. It is a crucial and essential skill for education, for employment, for moving forward, for advancing yourself in this world. It's disheartening that not all children have the same opportunities in terms of accessing books. Poverty, Sir Christopher, has played a very significant role in this too, and poverty levels in Northern Ireland, for example, are some of the highest in the United Kingdom. So it's good to be here to discuss what we can do to give children equal opportunities. I know the Minister has a deep passion and interest in this subject matter as well, and when he comes forward to answer the questions and requests that we all have, we put forward collectively, I'm quite sure that the Minister will respond in a very, very positive fashion, as he always does. Sir Christopher, the cost of living and the issues with poverty have meant that so many families are suffering financially, and in some cases cannot afford to put a meal on the table. That's a fact of life. I see that in my constituency office every week. Never mind purchasing books, which is far down the line for many people. A study has shown that 20% of parents were buying fewer books for their children, and that has now increased to some 36% who are struggling financially because of rising costs. A further 30%, that's another 30% on top of that, of parents have been encouraging their children to borrow books from schools and libraries that they cannot afford to purchase brand new. Honourable Gentleman for Rother Valley referred to his library, new library I think he referred to, where that's been used quite significantly. In Northern Ireland specifically, more than 1 in 5 children are in poverty, and officials have stated that the new figures are increasing, and that is indeed very concerning. One of my constituents, and it's always good to give examples, and I always do that when I come to any debates, she's a reading recovery specialist. She's also a P1 teacher. She's told me that she can tell within the first week which children have been read to and which have not. It tells in their ability to concentrate, to understand, to engage, and this must not be a matter of poverty or access to books. So if that recovery specialist and P1 teacher can tell me that, then it's quite clear that her interaction with those children is very clear and what needs to be done. I want, if I can, Sir Christopher, mention about the Royal National Institute for the Blind. They have a wonderful scheme. I want to highlight that if I can, and I want to ask the Minister a question in relation to it. They have been in touch with me ahead of this debate. In the UK, there are more than 41,000 children and young people supported by the local authority vision impairment specialist education services, and around 50% of young people with vision impairment have additional special educational needs or disabilities, and the Minister has always been responsive to those questions we asked him about those with those disabilities. The RNIB have introduced a new Bookshare service which opens the world of reading in an education for learners with a print disability, including those with a vision impairment or dyslexia. Again, Bookshare is currently only used in around 1 in 3 schools and needs government backing to be a more widely utilised service. So my question to the Minister, who I know is always responsive to the requests we put forward to him. What discussion has the Minister had with the RNIB, with their new scheme, their new initiative, Bookshare, just to ensure that if only 1 in 3 schools are getting it, to me, Sir Christopher, is a partnership that could be utilised better, using the charity, using the RNIB and government together to make sure that they reach out to the other 2/3 of schools who perhaps at this moment in time are not aware or not able to take advantage. In the UK, around 2 children every 1,000 have a vision impairment, and a further 10% are dyslexic. Bookshare currently provides 103 titles and partners with 1,100 publishers, including well-known names such as Taylor and Francis, Springer Nature, HarperCollins, and Penguin Random House. I would really encourage the Minister, genuinely, respectively, and as forcibly as I can, to raise more awareness of Bookshare and initiate this scheme across the whole of the UK too. I digress slightly, but I think it's important I put this on record as well. I think many people here, indeed I suspect those who are watching outside will know that I'm a Dolly Parton fan. It's not a secret. I think we're all Dolly Parton fans, by the way, Sir Christopher. Even you, I suspect. Well, maybe not. But just to say this, it wouldn't be fair to discuss access to books and not discuss Dolly Parton's Imagination Library. I remember the day that I put the EDM down. One of the first MPs to come to me was our colleague on this side, the Honourable Lady for Brentwood and Ellsworth. She came over and said, "Did you know that in my constituency I can access that Dolly Parton Imaginative Library?" And my constituents are doing that. Well, I didn't know that until the Honourable Lady told me. So the point I'm making is this. An Imagination Library that Dolly Parton does, which is dedicated to inspiring a love of reading by gifting books free of charge to children from birth to age 5. I remember when I did an interview with one of the, I think it was Sky News one night, in relation to something else, but they brought that issue up as well. And the lady, she had said, you know, and this is one of the presenters, she was saying, my children access those Dolly Parton Imaginative Library as well. So it's just surprising many people do it right across this great nation that we have. Through funding shared by Dolly Parton and local community partners in the United States and Canada, and this great United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, in Australia and the Republic of Ireland, there are 2.4 million total children registered and 204 million total books gifted, which is just a phenomenal way to encourage children to read. And in the US, 1 in 10 children have been in receipt of a book from the Dolly Parton Imagination Library. She's a good lady. She has a massive voice, and that's the reason. And I love her songs, because her songs all relate to life growing up, and you can very quickly recognise, at least I do anyway. And I'm not going to examples because there's too many examples to really say, but she makes the songs and part of your life as you grow up, and I think that's one of the reasons why I quite like it. But the work that she does and her Imagination Library does is something that reaches across this great world. So the philanthropist that she is shown in the good work that she does for the children. So to conclude, Sir Christopher, while we should rightfully be proud of the access to libraries which we have, and yet for our rural communities, the loss of the library vans, I'm of a vintage to know the library vans and remember them well coming round, is now showing in our education system. I understand that there is not, and there never will be, at least not in the foreseeable future, an endless amount of funding. But early years is essential, as that P1 educational lady said as well. That we must make sure that those early years are covered and that books are available. So when I asked the Minister to invest in our future by investing in our children and increasing the access to early years reading, I suspect, Minister, that not only could you do a partnership with the RNIB and their Bookshare, but I'm sure that Dolly Parton would be happy to do a partnership with you as well. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Sir Christopher. And it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I'm really thrilled to be here today, actually. And I think this is such an important but a really lovely debate as well, in terms of tone and content. For the obvious reasons, children are our future, and we have to think about how we can put them on the right trajectory in their journey in life, and reading is crucial to that. And I do just want to commend my honourable friend, the member for Rother Valley, for this debate, but also for his advocacy for access to books. He's been consistent on this, and he's a big voice in this area. And if I may say so, it's been really nice to follow the member for Strangleford, who has made me smile today, actually, with references to Dolly Parton's Imagination Library. She, quite frankly, is an incredible woman when it comes to philanthropy. And again, you know, someone that has articulated her worldview through her lyrics, but also put that into practice in terms of investing in children is absolutely crucial. And we can never overlook the investment that is required in early years in particular, and how, as I said, we can give children the best start in life. And with that, of course, improving literacy amongst children and young people is absolutely crucial to ensuring that we can actually, this is a statement of the obvious, but have a highly educated, highly skilled economy and a functional society going forward. We need to have people that actually learn from reading, have inquisitive minds, but also hunger for, you know, understanding good literature, good books, but also themselves how to express themselves. And literacy and reading is central to that. Children and young people. In our schools today, and I've been reminded of this morning actually, when I attended a memorial service of a very dear friend, the late Lord Young. They are the entrepreneurs of the future. They are the business leaders. They're the public servants of the future. They're the investors and inventors of the future. And so if we're not actually spending the time sorting out our structures, our institutions, our schools and everything else at this stage and getting it right in terms of all the things that we need to do, we're going to lose out on their potential and unleashing their potential and investing in their talent. And so for me, as a Member of Parliament and the Member of Parliament for Witham, literacy and improving access to books has been my focus when it comes to my schools. And having been elected in 2010, I was quite surprised, actually. I visited, as we all do, visited all my schools. And you learn so much from visiting schools, particularly when you become a Member of Parliament in the early days. And one issue that struck me the most was the level of literacy at the time were below the national average. And to be quite frank, you know, every government can say we've boosted money, we've done X, we've done Y, and all the rest of it. And of course, having come in 2010 and heard about, you know, Building Schools for the Future programme, for example, and all the previous investments in schools, it was really quite stark and quite shocking to hear about the number of children in my schools, and a lot of this correlated with indices of deprivation, which we have to focus on as well. We have to correct that where we have deprivation, and look at how we can actually do more to turn around outcomes for children. But there were certain schools and certain parts of my constituency where literacy was lagging behind in quite a shocking way. And at that time, approximately 1 in 6 11-year-olds were leaving school without the required level of reading. So working with local schools, and in particular head teachers, and I've mentioned one former head teacher now to the Minister previously. We had a very inspirational lady at the time, Mrs. Bass, who was head teacher at then Powers Hall Academy. I set up something called Get Witham Reading, which was a literacy scheme where we would promote reading, make it fun, obviously. And this was all about not just reading in schools, but guests coming into the schools. And when I say guests, the local mayor, local councillors, building bridges within the local communities, local people from the local community to come in to be read to, but also to read to children. And since 2012, this has been up and running every year. It encourages a day of reading activities and actually a good deal of fun. It's fair to say I can be a complete pain to many publishers because I'm also quite demanding of them now, because when I run Get Witham Reading, I like to at least give books to schools and even donate personally to the pupils. And I have done that pretty successfully in recent years. I'm hoping to donate over 1,000 books this summer to children in my constituency. And there are publishers that will be written to very shortly where I'll be, with my begging letters, asking them to do much more. And I think actually there is an onus upon publishers of children's books. When you think about the range of authors, including my honourable friend, the member for Watford, this is really important because genres of reading, different styles of reading and literacy are just so important to children of all ages. So reading encourage activities. We have fabulous stories actually of one particular school, it's the Powers Hall Academy, where they would run reading activities within the school throughout the day. One of their former caretakers would they'd have a Harry Potter theme, he'd build a train. When we had an aviation theme, he'd build an airplane, put it in the playground, and the children would have the experience of boarding a plane. They'd make their own boarding passes, they'd make their own currency. And one year we had the Titanic as a theme, and the children actually made lunch for the school guests based upon one of the menus on the Titanic. And this is exactly the way in which we can bring reading to life, but some of the great stories, history, you name it. And with that, ministers and prime ministers have supported this event in the past, including the minister, my right honourable friend, the member for Bognor Regis and Littlehampton, who will be joining me next month when we host Get Whittam Reading. I promise that we'll make it fun. It will absolutely be fun. And of course, these events encourage the characterizations, use your imagination to be a character and bring that to light. So we've all had plenty of Harry Potters, images from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. But with this, of course, staff and teachers join in, but actually parents join in. And for me, one of the biggest lessons, certainly in my time as a Member of Parliament, has sometimes been that disassociation between parents and their children's reading at home, and how we can actually encourage parents by bringing them to come into the schools to be part of this and then take the books away, read them to their children, and of course encourage the presence of more books at home, because many of these households at the time had no books and did not have books at home. So Get Whittam Reading is all about encouraging local children and young people to enjoy reading, to get them away from the consoles, despite the fact technology is important, and into books. I mean, I have a confession to make. In my teenage years, I probably read more smash hits and New Musical Express than I did various books. But irrespective of that, continuing the theme of reading has to continue, and that means we have to find ways in which initiatives where we can support more books going to schools, but actually some ownership of books. I think young people in particular like to own books, and we have to make that really easy for them. But of course, donating books is one aspect for that. As I said, I put in a plea to publishers and authors. I have an open invitation if any of them wish to come to Get Whittam Reading. They're welcome to contact me, donate their books, or even join us. But the situation back in 2010, I think, is a marked contrast to where we are now. And national literacy standards compared to our international competitors back then had fallen. And it is the resolve of the government and the ministers to do a great deal about that. In 2006, we were ranked 16th in the world on the Programme for International Student Assessments. And that had fallen since being ranked 6th in 2020. But by 2009, we'd fallen to something like 23rd in the world. So bear in mind, we are the country that has given the world Shakespeare, Bronte, Shelley, Tolkien. And if we're not featured in those league tables, what does that say about us? And I do want to pay tribute to the Minister and to all governments over the last decade, actually, because it's the focus and the rigour that has, since 2010, helped raise standards. And I pay particular tribute to the Minister, my right honourable friend, because it is his steadfast commitment. He's written to me over many years about this, when I have badgered him and he supported my initiatives, but also just actually being very open to do work with schools, for example, and give teachers confidence in this space as well. And I have seen some of the progress, I really have, and with that, the impact of the pupil premium. And I don't think we should forget the impact of the pupil premium, particularly in areas of deprivation, because certainly I've had experience where that has enabled my schools to focus additional investment on tackling lower literacy standards when it comes to pupils from lower income households and families. And we've now seen that when it comes to the Progress in International Reading Literacy Study, we're now ranked 4th out of participating countries, and that is incredible. So really, my message is one where we can never stand still in this area. I think the government and the Minister and others, everyone over the last decade have worked incredibly hard. But yet again, government can only do so much. And I think in this debate we've already heard already how there are great philanthropists, other organisations that are doing so much more, how partners can work with educational trusts to get books into schools, how our libraries can be slightly more welcoming. We need to keep them open as well. And in Essex, we've worked very hard, and I pay tribute to County Council as well, because they play an important role in supporting literacy. But I don't think it should be just about the Summer Reading Challenge, which is coming soon, obviously. We need to have reading challenges every single day. We need to encourage and set the bar quite high every single day as well. But when it comes to the Summer Reading Challenge into holiday activities and food programmes, I wonder if we can do much more to tie all of this together in a much more holistic approach. So, in conclusion, Sir Christopher, I just want to really say that we can't stand still. Generations of children should always feel the benefits of literacy, books and reading. We're a fantastic country when it comes to literacy and our authors. And of course, this is the start of their journey in life and how they could become the entrepreneurs, innovators of the futures if they have access to books. And that is something we all support. Thank you.
Justin Tomlinson.
Thank you, Sir Chris. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and it's a real pleasure to follow some excellent speeches. And I pay particular tribute to my honourable friend from Rother Valley, who is incredibly passionate and experienced in this area, and through the various debates and campaigns that he's personally led on, has really made a tangible difference in such an important area. And I know we couldn't have asked for a more receptive audience than the Minister, who is himself passionate on the importance of this area. So this should be one of those very easy debates for us to all both agree and come away with lots of positive things coming forward. And I also want to put on record that we are an esteemed company. My honourable friend for Watford has written fantastic children's books. They are definitely favourites of my daughter on her bookshelf, and she often chooses those. So I've had the pleasure of reading those on a number of occasions. Now, Sir Christopher, literacy has the power to shape young people's lives. Through reading, children can improve their knowledge, build confidence, concentration, and inspire their imaginations. And as a father of 2 young daughters, I've seen this firsthand. And only last night I was at a parents' evening for my eldest of my 2 daughters, and the majority of our conversation was around the importance of literacy to build all those key core aspects. And we all as parents want the best for our children, and there is no better way to equip their future opportunities than helping them being confident, articulate and literate. That opens so many doors and so many opportunities in whatever career path they seek to choose in the future. And I've been active on this issue for my entire time in politics, both as a councillor before coming to Parliament, also in the 2010 generation, and during my time in Parliament. I was proud to be chair of the Libraries APPG, and I was the lead member for Libraries on Swindon Borough Council, which included delivering the then award-winning new Central Library. I've just recently joined the APPG for literacy. I host the annual Summer Reading Challenge in Parliament every year that does so much to inspire the next generation of young people to take up reading, particularly during the summer holidays. And I know colleagues across the House regularly turn up to be photographed and help promote that locally, and it is hugely appreciated. In my constituency, we have WH Smith headquarters, who are not only one of the biggest sellers of books in this country, but the Chief Executive, Carl Coling, is personally very passionate about that and supports huge numbers of national and local initiatives, particularly through the Literacy Trust, to help create additional opportunities. I have quite a famous, wonderful independent bookshop called Bert's Books, which got fame in a recent social media posting when he innocently posted a picture of How to Kill Your Family and Prince Harry's spare book in his window that gave his store international fame. But he has bucked the trends to keep bookshops thriving on our footstep by excellent customer service, great social media presence, wonderful events for all ages and families, and a wonderful layout and design. So, and again, I've seen this with my family, that provides that excitement to want to engage in reading. And finally, I have the School Library Association head office also in my constituency, led by the wonderful Chief Executive Alison Tarrant. And I've got 4 key points I just wanted to quickly raise. First of all, around school libraries. I should actually be less keen to discuss this because my first experience of libraries was as a school librarian. I was sadly sacked. I like to think my career's improved since then. But it is worrying that only a third of primary schools have a dedicated member of staff for school libraries. On average, it's less than 2 hours per day a library is staffed, and 2/3 of primary schools don't have a dedicated budget. Now, ultimately, this comes down to the choice of the leadership teams, the heads. It is very much a postcode lottery, and I've seen that on those visits, and it is something we should do everything we can. And I do commend the School Library Association, who do their best to champion this course, to share best practice, to deliver opportunities to make that money go that little bit further. But it is telling that those schools with the best school libraries have the best engagement. It seems obvious, but it isn't a given, and it should be a given. Secondly, I want to highlight the importance of engaging volunteers. One of the former schools ministers, David Laws, visited one of my schools many, many years ago in my constituency. It was a school in a particular challenging area. And the head teacher was extremely excited to tell us about an initiative where she had linked up with the Penhill Ladies Luncheon Club, and on a Wednesday lunchtime offered them a free Sunday roast that cost roughly £1 a head out of the pupil premium budget. And those ladies would then sit and do one-to-one reading with the students who were furthest behind, because on average students who arrived at that school were 18 months behind, but by the time they'd finished that primary school education, that school had caught back up with the expected average, and that was in no small part to those volunteers coming in and investing that one-to-one time that wasn't always a given at home. And again, I think we should be doing all we can to encourage schools to utilise members of our community who often have time on their hands and are willing to help out. I also commend all the volunteers who support various events, the literacy hubs. In fact, my office hosts those each year as part, in conjunction with the Literacy Trust. And again, just giving those extra opportunities where it isn't a given in their own family home. And I'd also like to thank Celia of Imagination Nursery, who not only works at an outstanding nursery in my constituency, but beyond her working, puts on sessions for parents that are interactive, that are social, that encourage families to not only read together, but to think about the books. They will pause, they will do work around what they've read so far, what they think will come forward. And it really does catch the imagination of that next generation. And I commend Celia for all she's done and all of those families who have benefited. Thirdly, around public libraries, obviously councils for many generations have faced challenges around funding, changing habits of people. But one of the things that has worked successfully in Swindon was the majority of the community libraries switched ownership to the parish councils, who have a little bit more flexibility around their parish budgets. That has allowed opening hours to expand and also created a greater emphasis on community events to increase footfall and engagement beyond the community. And again, utilising volunteers, delivering books to those who can't easily get into the library. And we have seen a real renaissance in the usage and book issuing within those libraries. And my very good friend Michelle Dutton, who didn't follow my path as a failed school librarian and became a professional librarian, was very passionate about emphasising the importance of the opening hours to match those of busy families, particularly in the evenings or weekends, linking around those events to give a specific reason to take the family there. And finally, Sir Christopher, a real emphasis, the importance of an emphasis on new parents. Through the National Literacy Trust, there are book packs handed out by health visitors, and I think this is really, really important. But I think we should build on that to really emphasise what we all here understand the importance of, so all parents know that supporting their children to benefit from the enjoyment of reading genuinely does open up those doors and future career opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much, Sir Christopher. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. If I can start off by congratulating my honourable friend, the member for Rother Valley, in securing this debate. And as has been touched upon, it's great that there is so much consensus and a real understanding across all members about the importance of promoting reading and the availability of books. And if I could just also echo some of the comments about my right honourable friend, the Minister, in terms of his work in terms of promoting and ensuring the very highest quality in terms of teaching of reading and the establishment and embedding phonics within teaching in our schools has been so vital and will have over the I can't remember how many years he's been a minister, but I think it's he's knocking up over 10, will have had an impact in terms of children's lives and their ability to read to the highest of levels and the very best of levels of hundreds and thousands of children, that he's made a real difference to their lives. I wanted to address a few short points. I'm very conscious that Minister and Shadow Minister will want to speak, but we are seeing 20% of parents are buying fewer books today than they were just a few years ago, and we are seeing real challenges. As has been touched upon by other members, it's absolutely vital for children to have books in their home. By having the availability of books in their home, it encourages that innate curiosity in every child to pick it up, to explore, and actually to have a new world opened up to them as they go through their pages. And of course, I'll give way to my honourable friend.
Just on that point, first of all, can I say thank you for the kind mentions during the debate for my own books. But on that particular point about opening up a new world, one of the areas that we haven't spoken about today is the role of comic books. I'm a big sci-fi and comic book and graphic novel fan. At the weekend, I popped into Lewis B Comics and Collectibles in Watford, not for a visit, but because I wanted to go there and see what they had on offer. And I just wonder if my honourable friend, right honourable friend, would agree with me that we must not be snobby about the types of books that will get kids to read, and adults as well. And I think graphic novels and comic books have a really important role to play in this.
I certainly agree with my honourable friend, and I think that to get a child reading anything is an incredibly important start. It is to fire that imagination, and whether it is with comics or whether it is with his own books, which he's going to pass me a list of all the titles later to read out and say available at all great local bookstores and probably Amazon as well. But we'll probably give a plug for that later. I think just to inspire, because actually by opening a book, it actually opens different worlds. And actually to be able to get that child to sort of lose themselves in the imagination and the excitement of a book is one of the most precious gifts that we can give that child. But there is a sad reality, is that children in some of the poorest homes have least access to books. And it is something that is of great concern, I think, to all members in this House. And how can we do more to make sure that there isn't that lack of books in those homes? I'd like to pay tribute to Book Trust and their Book Start scheme. I think it's an amazing thing. And one of the areas that I do have concern about is actually, of course, families where mum and dad can't read. And actually, how do you help those children at the very earliest stages of their life actually start discovering the joy of books? And what's been said to me many, many times, even if mum and dad can't read, just to be going through the books themselves and explaining the pictures and pointing out and almost telling the story themselves, even if it's making up the story with the aid of the pictures, is an important part of a child's learning. But what we really want to be looking at is how can we maybe get health visitors to be encouraging parents who maybe can't read to understand the importance and the value to doing that with their children. But critically and importantly, getting those books into their home and getting that early intervention. Because we all know that if children have the ability to read, if the children have the best place, have the best opportunity in terms of being able to discover the joy of books, it gives them the best opportunities later on in life. And children do have some real challenges. 41% of parents, when they were surveyed by the National Literacy Trust, said there was no quiet space for children to read at home, and 92% of parents surveyed thought it's so important for children to have access to a good library. In South Staffordshire, we're incredibly lucky that we've got a broad spread of libraries, whether that's in Great Worley, Chesney, Brood, Kinver, Purton, Codsall and Wombourne. So there's an easy access for people to be able to go to a local community library. And I'd like to take the opportunity to thank so many volunteers who go into those libraries, those libraries, making sure that that service is available, along with professional services of librarians that are also there in many of those libraries. But actually communities, if I think about Brood Library, actually it's manned all by volunteers. Not only do you get a book, you also get a cup of coffee as well, which seems to be an added service which is always very welcome. And that's the case in Kinver, Great Worley and Cheslinhay. But it's relying on volunteers to keep those libraries open and making sure that vital service is available to so very many. 73% of pupils who have access to a library are attaining higher literacy scores than those who do not. It just goes to show the importance of libraries in our community. And it's right, comments have already been made about the importance of having library facilities in school. But we also want to ensure that there is somewhere that is warm, somewhere that is comforting, and somewhere that is enjoyable for young people and people of all ages to be able to go to in their community, in the evening and at weekends. And if I can bring the example of Purton Library, which has done an amazing job of not only just bringing to life the written word, but actually encouraging through its science fairs and through its Spring Watch, where it's actually been bringing partners, whether it's archaeological societies, whether it is environmental groups, actually into the library to sort of make sure that it's not just about learning from a book, but it's actually a much broader base of learning. If I could just, before concluding, touch on a few brief additional matters. We need to have a heavier emphasis in schools about the importance of having a library in every single school. Like the Minister, him and I are probably in agreement here of a certain nervousness about ring-fencing budgets and the problems that can cause. But as the Minister will well know through his longevity of service, there's many ways that maybe gentle persuasion can be put on schools, either through guidance or working with Ofsted, by making sure that there's a heavy emphasis there about the importance of having a library in every single school, not just secondary schools, but you want the passion and the enjoyment of reading and books to come at primary school age. And I appreciate it's not within the Minister's portfolio, but a real emphasis on local authorities. There's actually, it may seem an easy choice to close a library, but it is always the wrong choice to close a library. And I would very much ask the Minister if he can, with the robustness, vigour and authoritative way that I know he does so well, go to his fellow ministers within DCMS, which I believe holds the lead on libraries, and Department for Levelling Up, about making sure that ministers in those departments make it clear to local authorities that libraries are there to be protected. There's something that delivers so much to every single child, but people of all ages. And of course, those who may be in later life, haven't got the reading skills that you wish them to have got at earlier stages in their life. Of course, community libraries are so vital for them in order to be able to have access to great and brilliant literature. Thank you very much.
I want to begin, as others have, by thanking the honourable gentleman from Rother Valley for bringing this debate forward. And I stand to speak in this debate as a former English teacher of 23 years, an avid reader, and somebody whose life story has been shaped and transformed by the power of reading. Through a difficult childhood, books were my solace, my comfort, and I don't think it's overstating the case to say that books were my life support. No matter what was going on around me as a child, whilst I was growing up, Books gave me an escape, without which I really don't know what would have become of me. And every child should have that escape, that comfort, that access to building literacy, which cannot be just about what happens in a classroom. And there's one thing about the ability to read the words on a page, but it is quite another thing entirely to understand how language works, how meaning is created, and how language can be used to both persuade and manipulate. And this can be taught, but ultimately it is inherently linked to your experience of reading and the written word. And that is the true meaning of literacy. And it's something that we should want for all our citizens. And I confess, on a point that was made earlier, I confess that I have discussed with members across this House. I don't understand, I have never understood why folk in England, why MPs in this House don't trumpet more loudly their wonderful literary heritage and canon. It's hugely impressive. Dickens, Trollope, Shakespeare, Collins, and I don't understand why people in England and MPs from England in this House don't make much more of them, because I certainly would if I were in their shoes. And as an English teacher, I always made sure that every single class, first year to sixth year, regardless of ability level, every single one of them had the opportunity, indeed, I persuaded them that it was an opportunity, they really didn't have any choice, that they should every year have the opportunity to enjoy a Shakespeare play. Now, I understand that Shakespeare plays were written to be performed, but they're also actually extremely important in terms of the written word. I grew up in a home without books, as too many children still do, as we've heard, but I was lucky because I was the youngest of 8 children, and I was very often able to top up the very regular 3 books I was permitted to check out of the local library at a time. I was able to use the library tickets of all my older siblings. Added to that, there was also the primary school library, in which I took such an interest that my primary 7 teacher used to consult me about what books he should buy with the library school budget allocation. So, as I say, in many ways, I was very lucky. Many other children are not so lucky. And it almost goes without saying that children who don't have access to books, children who are not exposed to books, who are not provided with the opportunity and encouragement to cultivate the habit of reading, will not reach their academic potential, because the evidence on this is stark and unequivocal. Reading improves outcomes for children across the board. And as a former English teacher, when the new S1 intake arrive, the very first piece of short writing that you ask them to do immediately tells you the children who read and the children who don't, because it is immediately apparent in their level and sophistication of expression. And it's very clear to see. There is no downside to encouraging and supporting children to read. And unless, of course, you count the numerous rows which I got at school and secondary school for hiding in the changing rooms during PE so that I could finish the chapter of whatever book I happened to be reading at that time. Now, I noticed that many people have talked today about highlighting the importance of supporting literacy in the very young. And that is, of course, self-evidently the case. In Scotland, we have the Scottish Book Trust, which delivers 2 universal book gifting programmes funded by the Scottish Government, BookBug and the Read, Write and Count initiative, which supports families in playing, reading and learning with their young children and to help instil an early love of reading. And through this programme, all children in Scotland receive 6 free bags of high-quality books between birth and the age of 8, totalling 16 books across 6 bags, with an additional 2 books gifted to expectant parents in the baby box. Scotland, it is thought, has the largest universal book gifting offer in the whole world. Now, given my lifelong relationship with books, I'm deeply proud of that and the transformative potential it provides for children. alongside this, across the UK as a whole, 19% of 5 to 8-year-olds don't own a single book, according to the National Literacy Trust, which is deeply sad, I think. But in Scotland, millions of pounds has been provided to support our libraries as well through the Scottish Library Fund and other such schemes. Of course, I wish there was more funding for this. I genuinely do. But I think what is important is the commitment and recognition of the value of access to books and promoting reading that has been established as an important principle. So we can build further on that, and we certainly should. And I also appreciate the Honourable Member Strangford's comment about Dolly Parton, which of course we all applaud. Cultivating the habit of reading, of course, is important, and over the years people have come up with various ways how to do this, but I'm quite old-fashioned about this. I don't really think that we need to rely on children dressing up and such, and I know that children take great pleasure from that, but I don't think we need to rely on them dressing up as their favourite character, although if they want to, that's fine, it doesn't hurt anybody. But the love of reading need not require such dramatic pursuits, because ultimately a love of reading is learned through appreciating the calm, quiet, powerful joy which is found in the gentle unfolding of a narrative, an exciting narrative captured between the covers of a book or a Kindle, or even, as people have said, through an audiobook, in a way that cannot be replicated through the passive activity, although enjoyable, but the passive activity of watching a film. Our public libraries, as people have said today, are a real prize in our communities. Aside from the opportunities they provide for social interaction, warm spaces and digital inclusion, aside from all these things which of themselves are extremely important, public libraries are integral in our quest to raise attainment, to close the attainment gap. Because in order to close or narrow the attainment gap, one of the important things we need to do is provide access to books not just for children, but for their parents. We need to bring parents on that journey with us to narrowing the attainment gap, some of whom themselves may have grown up with no access to books and who have not themselves cultivated or discovered the joy, the powerful joy that reading for pure pleasure can bring. We need to create a wider culture of reading. If we want parents to read to and with their children, and as I say, my 23 years as an English teacher tells me that even at the age of 17, 18, these children, young people, love being read to. If we want parents to do that with their children, and of course we do, we need to get parents themselves reading. We need reading as an enjoyable pastime to become normalised in households. Very often it isn't. And we can tackle that, but I don't believe we can tackle that properly or seriously without access to public libraries. Very often in households it's now unusual for the TV or the music to be switched off and people to just sit and spend an hour reading either together or, you know, in the same room or reading the same book together. It's quite frankly uncommon. I'll put it no stronger than that, but it's less common than it ought to be. The role of teachers and the role of school libraries are, of course, vital, but public libraries allow children and parents to actively and literally discover and explore the pleasure of books together. So access to books matters, but instilling a love of reading also matters. And as an English teacher, I often found that children were very happy to respond to the encouragement to read and to read independently. But what you find is around the age of 14 or so, it seemed this cultivation of the habit of reading seemed to plateau. And there's a number of things, or fall away altogether actually, and there's a number of things that schools and teachers and English departments can do to tackle that, which I don't have time to tackle here. But we need to support, encourage and model to children the fact that reading is a joyful way to spend our time and can be an escape, it can be a solace, and importantly, a companion to us throughout our entire lives. So we should continue to ensure the best, most accessible and richest opportunities to read, but we need to take parents with us, and we need to reach out to those parents who we haven't yet taken with us. In a digital age, reading and literacy has never been more important, and coincidentally, the digital age is also a very important tool to support reading and get our communities between the covers of a book.
Stephen Morgan.
It's a pleasure to serve with you in the chair, Sir Christopher, and I would like to start by thanking the Honourable Member for Rother Valley for bringing forward this important debate. Books are the cornerstone of our education system and how we learn. So it's a pleasure to be speaking about how we can improve access to books, close the literacy gap, and ensure every child has the opportunity to thrive. I'd like to open my remarks by paying tribute to all English teachers, librarians and literacy charities across the country, from the Dolly Parton Imagination Library to the Pompey Pirates in my own constituency. Behind school libraries and bookshelves is the hard work being done by teachers, teaching assistants, librarians, parents and volunteers to support children develop and literacy attainment. As we heard from the Honourable Member for Rother Valley, he made some really helpful points with regards to the value of reading, of owning books, and the importance of storytelling. And I echo remarks made about his advocacy for reading. We have had a number of interventions and speeches on investing in catch-up, the variety of forms books can take, the value of reading to children, and the importance of independent bookshops and libraries in our communities. And Sir Christopher, I'd like to thank all members for their good-spirited contributions to today's debate. As we've heard today, books are fundamental to a child's journey in learning how to read and write, but they do not serve this purpose alone. Books open the door to our entire education system, to a world of learning from geography, history, English to physics, maths, music and beyond. Books enrich all aspects of our lives. They educate us, they motivate us, and they inspire us. And they open new worlds of exploration and imagination. Now, for many of us, it's hard to imagine a world without books. And it's hard to imagine how we would function without an ability to read or write. But unfortunately, the National Literacy Trust has found that 1 in 4 children are still leaving primary school unable to read at their expected level. The NLT also found that 1 in 6 adults in England have literacy levels at below level 1, considered to be very poor literacy skills. So, Christopher, it's been shown that lower literacy could go on to impact in every aspect of an individual's life, with negative impacts on personal relationships, well-being and further education, as well as a greater risk of unemployment or being in low-paid work. And it is a skill as crucial as understanding road signs or price labels, the dosage instructions on medicine, filling out a form, or making sense of a bus or train timetable. But unfortunately, in the past decade, it's become increasingly difficult to access books. Britain has faced the closure of almost 800 public libraries since 2010, in a decade that has seen local authority finances slashed. Now, we know that in schools, when budgets get tight, library resources are often amongst the first to get cut. Recent research from Penguin Books UK shows 1 in 8 schools in England do not have a library or dedicated reading space. This jumps to 1 in 4 schools in the most deprived communities in our country, and teachers up and down the country are using their own money to buy books. Now, Sir Christopher, the problem is even bigger in primary schools, where 1 in 7 state primary schools do not have a dedicated library or library space. This translates to 750,000 children in the UK who do not have access to books to read via a school library. At a crucial age, children need to learn to read. Points made by my honourable member for North Swindon in today's debate. So it's no wonder schools are still being forced to make difficult choices when their real terms funding still remains below 2010 levels. Yet again, it's the most vulnerable who are paying the price for this government's decisions. While better off families may be able to provide home purchase books, those from poorer backgrounds do not have the same luxury. 1 in 3 parents who are struggling financially because of the cost of living crisis have said that they are buying less books for their children as a result. Experiences of financial strain have a direct impact on literacy, with families not being able to afford books and having less time and energy to spend on reading. For disadvantaged children, it is 2 in 5 who leave primary school unable to read at the expected level. Now, Sir Christopher, the government claims that this is a priority. For its Levelling Up white paper, it said, and I quote, "A new national mission to ensure 90% of children leaving primary school in England are reaching the expected standard in reading, writing and maths by 2030. Yet the share of pupils leaving primary school meeting literacy and numeracy benchmarks fell from 65% in 2019 to 59% in 2020. The government's target is a far cry from reality. Children are moving backwards in their achievements, and the attainment gap is growing. Chair, this problem is compounded by crisis in recruitment and retention of teachers and a lack of budget available for specialist school librarians. Last year, more teachers left our schools than joined initial teacher training courses. The government fell 16% short in hitting its targets for English teachers. And this year, the National Foundation for Educational Research predict the government will fall 30% short of its targets.
Give way on that break point.
I will give way.
Thanks, Christopher. My honourable friend is making an excellent point. In my constituency, which is maybe typical of many parts of the southeast of England, a local head teacher recently told me that she had 1 applicant for a job, just 1. And that is the level of difficulty I think, unfortunately, our schools now face. And I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for making this point today. And I look forward to the Minister responding and to hear more about how the government will tackle this very severe recruitment and retention crisis.
I thank my honourable friend for that intervention. I know he's a tireless champion for schools in his constituency, and I think we absolutely do have a teacher recruitment and retention crisis in our country, and we need to look very boldly at some of the solutions to address that crisis. So, Christopher, the first step to addressing the problem is to ensure children are taught how to read and write properly. This fundamental skill must be given the attention that it deserves. That means schools having the necessary resources to do so, with children being taught by experts and not being taught by overstretched teachers covering for their colleagues. So, Christopher, that is why Labour is committed to ensuring that every pupil is taught by specialist teachers in each subject, including English. Now, we will do this by recruiting thousands of new teachers across the country, making sure schools aren't understaffed, that English classes aren't being taught by cover staff or other subject specialists, and that teachers aren't burnt out by doing multiple people's jobs at once. And once in schools, we'll also support teachers with an entitlement to ongoing training. Chair, we want every young person to have the opportunity to succeed academically and succeed in life. And as has been outlined today, central to that is developing their reading and writing skills, opening the door to our education system and to a world of further learning. Their ability to read and write is a bridge to the ability to explore, create, innovate, imagine, and thrive. So, Sir Christopher, as we've heard today, all children deserve to have their lives enriched by books for their health, for their future, and their future life chances, and for their enjoyment. The importance of access to books on literacy levels is simply too important to be met with empty targets and empty rhetoric. Therefore, in his response, I hope the Minister will outline what his department is doing to improve access to children's books, to increase the number of children leaving primary school without to increase the number of children leaving primary school without the required standard of literacy, to recruit its target number of English teachers, and to retain the brilliant English teachers already in the profession. So, Christopher, I look forward to hearing the Minister's remarks. I would like to restate my thanks to all members for their contributions today. Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you very much, Sir Christopher. It's a pleasure to serve yet again under your chairmanship in this important debate on a subject that really could be of enormous importance. And I pay tribute to my honourable friend for securing this debate and for the way he introduced it, and for the work that he's doing in his own constituency as an active champion of literacy. And I also totally agree with the honourable member for Strangford and with the member for North Ayrshire and Arran about the importance of children being read to, children of all ages, to instil a love of reading and to improve vocabulary of those children. And I'm looking forward to visiting my right honourable friend's constituency and seeing Get Witham Reading later this year. And I also pay tribute to her for her passion about ensuring children in her constituency read well and have access to books. And also I'd like to pay tribute to my honourable friend, the member for Swindon North, for his commitment to high-quality education in his constituency, about which we talk regularly, but also not just general education, but also reading in particular. Now, my honourable friend, the member for Rother Valley, says that we should be improving children's access to books. I wholeheartedly agree with him, and that's why we have strengthened the national curriculum to focus on developing reading and putting phonics at its heart to ensure that children can read. Reading is the principal way to acquire knowledge, and the national curriculum encourages pupils to develop that habit of reading widely and often for both pleasure and for information, to develop a love of reading. The texts that young people read play a significant part in their wider development, broadening their horizons and introducing new ideas and perspectives. As a child, I loved C.S. Lewis, C.S. Forrester, E. Nesbit, L.P. Hartley, and today I'm ploughing my way through the 97 books that have won the Pulitzer Prize since the Fiction Prize was introduced in 1919. Charities such as the World Book Day and the National Literary Trust work tirelessly to raise the profile of reading for pleasure in our country, and for this I thank them and recognise their enormous contribution. The government, Sir Christopher, is committed to continuing to raise reading standards, and we place a great focus on ensuring that early reading is taught well from the very beginning of a child's time at school. And following this focus and the commitments of hundreds of thousands of teachers up and down the country, England came fourth out of the 43 countries that tested children of the same age in the 2021 Progress in International Literacy study, PEARLS. Now, the results were published only last month, and I'm grateful to all the primary school teachers and teaching assistants whose commitment to reading and embracing the phonics approach introduced by the government made this possible. Indeed, the strongest predictor of PEARLS' performance was the Year 1 phonics screening check mark, with higher marks predicting higher PEARLS scores. England's average score of 558 in PEARLS was significantly above the international median of 520, the European median of 524, and significantly higher than all other participants testing at the same age, with the exception of Singapore, Hong Kong and Russia. But there are very high scores, of course, in Northern Ireland in the PEARLS survey as well, and I pay tribute to teachers in Northern Ireland for their achievement in the PEARLS study as well. Now, this success in PEARLS follows the government's greater focus on reading in the primary curriculum and a particular focus on phonics. And it also follows reforms such as the English Hubs programme, the introduction of the phonics screening check in 2012, the reading framework, and the leading literacy national professional qualifications for teachers. Now, my honourable friend, the member for Rother Valley, raised the importance of children having books at home and the correlation between book ownership and educational success. And in that 2021 PEARLS study, overall performance was strongly associated with the number of books pupils had in their homes, with the average score of pupils in England with fewer than 10 books in their home at 507 points, compared to an average score of 591, down from 598 in 2016, for those with more than 200 books at home. Now, the English Hubs programme
is designed to spread the best practice of how schools teach their children to read. And so far it's supported 1,600 schools intensively, with a focus on supporting those children making the slowest progress in reading, many of whom come from disadvantaged backgrounds. And this includes schools in Rother Valley, which are supported by two of our English hubs, Learners First and St Wilfrid's. And between them, these two hubs have supported over 100 other schools in the area. Schools supported intensively as partner schools by English hubs outperform non-partner schools by around 7 percentage points when comparing the change in the Year 1 phonics screening check. Now, we have also introduced the Reading Framework Guidance for schools, and this was first published in 2021. Over 90% of schools have read the framework, and it's providing guidance to schools about how to improve the teaching of reading. Now, my honourable friend also raised his concerns about provision for children with special educational needs and disabilities, particularly surrounding children who have chronic fatigue syndrome, Addison's disease, and who suffer from migraines. And the next reading framework will include guidance on supporting children who are struggling to read, including those with special educational needs. And we regularly speak to experts, including SEND specialists, specialist schools and English hubs, about the way in which the department can support teachers to ensure children with dyslexia and other learning difficulties can progress well in their reading and meet the expectations by the time they leave primary school. If my honourable would forgive me, there's literally only 4 minutes left in the debate. Now, the honourable member for Strangford raised the important issue of children with visual impairments, and I will ask my officials to engage with the RNIB about the most effective way of harnessing the power of digital media to improve literacy, including the use of audio books. Now, the department also recognises the vital importance of the teaching profession, and is committed to offering the very best professional development. And as part of our long-term education recovery plan, we announced £184 million of funding to deliver 150,000 fully funded training scholarships for national professional qualifications by the end of 2024. And to incentivise small schools to participate, the Targeted Support Fund provides an additional grant for every teacher who participates in the national professional qualifications in the next year. And we also have a national professional qualification for leading literacy, which was launched in October last year, to train existing teachers to become literacy experts who will drive up standards of teaching of reading in their schools and improve the outcome of every child. Now, the government believes that all pupils deserve to be taught a knowledge-rich curriculum that promotes extensive reading both in and out of school. The national curriculum promotes reading for pleasure, with evidence showing that this is more important for children's educational development than, for example, their parents' level of education. And I agree with my right honourable friend, the member for South Staffordshire, about the importance of libraries in increasing children's access to books and promoting reading for pleasure, whether in schools or through public libraries. And libraries are particularly important during the current difficulties surrounding the cost of living and ensuring children have access to books. And a national literacy survey conducted in December last year, referred to by my honourable friend, the member for Rother Valley, reported that nearly 30% of parents stated that they were borrowing more children's books from libraries, and a quarter said they were asking their children to borrow more books from school libraries. Of course, it is for individual schools to decide how best to provide and maintain a library service, something alluded to by my right honourable friend, the member for South Staffordshire, who I've enjoyed working at the Department for Education for a few years, and we worked very well together, and I paid tribute to him for his time at the Department for Education. Many head teachers recognise the important role school libraries can play in improving literacy by ensuring that suitable library facilities are provided. There are several schemes which look into improving reading for pleasure and children's access to books in school and public libraries. Firstly, the Reading Agency's Summer Reading Challenge, referred to by honourable members during this debate. It is the biggest Reading for Pleasure programme for primary schools, primary school-aged children, and each year the challenge motivates over 700,000 children of all abilities to read for enjoyment over the summer holidays. I'd also like to highlight the National Literacy Trust's Primary School Library Alliance partnership that aims to bring partners together to transform 1,000 primary school libraries by 2025, providing them with books, with training and support. And their partners include World of Stories, Marcus Rashford Book Club, and Raise a Reader Oxfordshire. And they reported in November last year, a year after its launch, that they had worked with over 330 schools, reaching over 120,000 children across the country. Sir Christopher, the department is committed to improving literacy for all pupils, because unless children learn to read, they cannot read to learn. Reading is an essential foundation for success in all subjects, and we're determined to drive progress still further in the years ahead. Thank you, Sir Christopher.
Alexander Stafford.
Thank you, Chair. Thank everyone for taking part in this important debate today. Clearly, there's almost cross-party consensus the importance of access to books, not just at schools, but also in the home, whether that's being gifted books by libraries, by charitable organisations like Dolly Parton's Foundation mentioned by the Honourable Member, but also reading with parents, guardians, with community groups, as the Honourable Friend mentioned.
Order. We now move on to the next debate.